It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodi.
Hello and welcome back to It's Your Own Time You're Wasting. My name's Jodi. I'm an ex-maths teacher that now works for Beyond, writing secondary resources. And this is mine and Marie's little slice of staff room chat. So this is my co-host Marie.
Hello. I am an ex-English teacher. I also work for Beyond, writing lots of lovely resources for all you teachers out there to help you to keep your sanity. Thank you. So today we're talking about school trips, Jodi.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to have to be quite quiet on this one because as a maths teacher, we never got to do school trips. As a teacher, I've been on a grand total of 1 school trip.
Really? And where was it to?
It was a residential trip, and at the time I lived at a school. I worked at a school. I didn't live there.
No, you probably did more or less live there, though, to be fair. I think that was a Freudian slip.
So I worked in a school which was about half an hour away from my house in one direction. So I drove to the school for 7 o'clock in the morning, got in a coach, drove back past my house to go half an hour in the other direction to go on a residential camping trip with year 7s.
Ooh, proper camping?
I didn't camp, but most of the kids did. They needed a volunteer to sleep in the bunkhouse, and I was like, me, I'll do it. I'm not a camper, but I did have to sleep in a bunk bed. It felt going back. I did Camp America when I was a student, and it felt a bit like going back to there, but less sunny.
I, though, Jodi, have only ever been on one residential when I was a teacher, and it was possibly the most cheapskate residential you could imagine, because it consisted of a sleepover in the gym.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So it wasn't even anywhere else. It was at school, and we slept on the mats, the PE mats.
That's bad.
Oh, it was awful.
They did a thing at when I was doing my PGCE. I got the chance to go teach in a school in Holland, where you got locked in the school overnight, and there was like a couple of teachers about, but not like organised fun. You just got to do what you want.
Ooh.
The only condition was the same year group had to tidy up. So, like, they had a massive water fight one year, and it was fine. They just tidied up afterwards.
That's such a good idea. I like that.
They're like equivalent of end of year 11 type thing.
Yeah.
It was great. And there was, because it was Holland, they were quite good at, like, the kids are trusted a lot more over there. So, like, they weren't allowed to bring in alcohol, and no one brought in alcohol because they got told they weren't allowed to. It's just a completely different vibe when it comes to stuff like that. So I don't think it'd happen because, all the kids are bringing alcohol.
Yeah, it wouldn't work, I don't think, that here. But maybe we should have more of that sort of trust, because studies have shown that the more you trust other people, the more trustworthy you are seen to be, and it's like a huge cycle.
Absolutely.
But I have had my fingers burnt being trusting of pupils. We had a pupil on, when they used to send pupils a few miles away from where they were from to try and break the cycle of them being involved in gangs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm just gonna treat this pupil like I would any other, and I gave him some money to take down to the office, and he left school and bought drugs with it. So that was the end of that.
It's so sad when you can't trust students like that, isn't it? It's just such a shame.
And I really wanted to.
It's your own time you're wasting. So why not stick the kettle on, put your feet up and have a cuppa? Ah, bliss.
Get this, English teacher, I have never ever been to theatre with my children.
What? Oh,
yeah.
That is like my dream school trip.
I know, but they wouldn't let us run theatre trips.
What?
It was seen as frivolous.
Oh, see, I live in Sheffield, and we have like 2 huge theatres that are one company. They put on, like, when they've got a Shakespeare or whatever, they put on a special show that's just for like school, and it's free quite often.
Oh wow!
Or dead cheap, because it's like all part of their lottery funding, I think. But yeah, like great stuff like that.
Yeah. So I was near Manchester, so we were near big theatres.
Yeah. And the BBC, a big part of the BBC now, isn't it?
It wasn't then, though, to be fair. It was still all in London. But we used to get theatre companies come into school. That was seen as more doable. I suppose it's less hassle. But it's not the same thing. I think it's really important for pupils when they're studying a play to go and experience it in the theatre.
Do you think it's important to kind of have that cultural side of it? You know, not all parents can either afford to take kids or have the time or motivation to take kids to things like museums and that.
Well, it is very expensive as well, isn't it, to go to theatre? So it would be beyond the reach of some parents. Yeah. And I do think it's important that we offer pupils opportunities they might not otherwise have had.
Definitely.
And I do think sometimes, depending on what area you're in, the pupils can have a very narrow point of view of the world.
Yes.
I remember doing with one of my Manchester classes, we were doing Holiday Island, which was a speaking and listening project I used to run in the last 2 weeks of term, because obviously you assess the speaking and listening and then you didn't have to mark any of the work that they'd actually done on the paper. And they had to draw a big island on a big A3 sheet, and they could put anything they wanted on it on this holiday island. They could have absolutely anything. Water parks, trips to the moon. Imagination was the limit.
My imagination was going wild now with the things like that.
Exactly. But the sort of thing they used to put on there was Tesco's.
What?
Yeah, and I'd think, oh, bless them.
At least have Waitrose, live it up.
Yes, exactly. So this is where I think school trips are really, really valuable.
I do think there's a kind of trick missed, because it's such a thing that you don't have maths school trips. And I think the people who went on the residential, like every maths teacher wanted to go because it meant they got a school trip.
Yeah.
But there are things you could do. Some of it is geographically a little bit more challenging. But when I was at school, we had a school trip to Cambridge once. And, I went to quite a posh school. But it was a maths trip down to Cambridge. We were only 14. They talked about how you could get into Cambridge University. We had a lecture, we had this, we had that. And it was maths and science together. And honestly, I remember it now. And it was one of the best school trips I ever went on. And it's why I applied to Cambridge. I didn't get in, but it's why I applied.
Yeah, but that's important, isn't it? It's showing pupils the opportunities that are out there that they wouldn't otherwise necessarily know about.
Yeah, and I grew up in quite a wealthy area, but I was still a state school kid, and it was brilliant to kind of show that as an option and to understand kind of how epic it is at Cambridge. Yeah, and it's just brilliant. We got to do loads of really cool stuff.
Yeah, that sounds really good, and I don't see why any department can't have trips, to be honest. There's always something relevant, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think with a bit of imagination, you can kind of do what you want with it, and you can make it into what you want it to be. And I think as a maths teacher, school trips are kind of seen more as a nuisance because we never get the benefit. So you have the kids missing your class and doing this and doing that, but you never get the day out yourself.
Yeah, that must be disheartening. I tell you what was disheartening, though. The second school I worked at, where I only worked 2 days a week. Yeah. So I didn't often get to go on the trips because often they weren't on my working days. But I was put in charge of doing all the risk assessments for every single trip the department ran.
Ooh, who'd want to do that?
No one wants to do that. And that's why they sort of said, new girl, oh, here's a nice little job for you. You do the risk assessments for us.
Great.
Oh, it was awful. Absolutely awful.
I've just remembered another school trip I did, and I don't know if it counts. But in my second year of teaching, the person who ran the girls' rugby club left. And being a new teacher, they were like, I can bully Jodi into doing this. So somehow, having played rugby about a dozen times in my life, I ended up taking over the girls' rugby team. Which was fine, because rugby was really, really big at the school, boys rugby. And a lot of the sixth form rugby guys were like, we'll run it, you just need to be the teacher. But I took them on a school trip to the local town to have like a training session. And that was pretty cushy. I only got to miss one lesson. But like, got to go on the coach with them, and then I just sat there while they played rugby, and then I came home with them.
Oh yeah, that was quite a good one. Yeah, I quite like the coach bit.
Yeah.
They all sort of like singing and joining in with each other. I always found that really, really nice.
What are your go-to school trip songs? Ours used to be Charlie Had a Pigeon.
I've never even heard of Charlie Had a Pigeon.
I'm not singing it. I'm just going to be clear. I just saw our producer's face light up like, I'm going to get Jodi to sing. No, it's not happening.
Has it got actions?
No, it just goes round and round. Charlie had a pigeon, Charlie had a pigeon, Charlie had a pigeon that flew. It flew in the morning, it flew in the night, and when it came back, it was covered in... That was the word.
And did they actually, just continue to the next Charlie Had a Pigeon, or did somebody shout poo?
Sometimes someone shouted a word, and it got more and more rhyming, because Charlie had a pigeon that was a duck. And so on.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it kind of, you had to see how far
you were risking it there.
Oh, see, I'm going with the good ones. We got better than duck.
Did you now? I think maybe you should stop there, though. Yes, thanks for that.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodi. There's not a lot they don't know about teaching.
So welcome to this week's guest, Robyn. Today, Robyn, we're talking about school trips, but before we get onto that subject, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, hello, I'm Robyn. I am an English teacher of nearly 17 years. I don't really want to admit how long I've been teaching for, because it gives an indicate of my age. If you can hear a little noise in the background, I am being assisted by my 9-month-old son, Toby.
Hi,
yes.
Toby.
Hello, Toby. Yes, he's just...
Hello, Toby.
He's chatting away very verily, so he's going to add his own thoughts and input into this. Oh, yes.
Okay,
yes.
So Robyn, going to school trips.
Oh, yes.
What school trips have you been on?
Lots of day trips, to like the British Library, Poetry Live, the eponymous Poetry Live. I'm sure all of us have been on Poetry Live more than once or twice. I've done, in my, shall we say it, my salad days when I was younger and a lot more enthusiastic, I did a fair few abroad residentials as well. That's right, Toby, yes.
Oh, did you now?
Yeah, I did. I went to
you
Germany.
Actually went abroad with students?
With students, with sixth formers and GCSE students and
Amazing.
All of that jazz.
Yeah, that was brave, Robyn.
So do you think that location makes school trips easier? Because I was saying, like, you said they're the British Library. I've been to the British Library when I was a student, a university student. The idea of doing a school trip to the British Library from Sheffield is just not going to happen. Do you think kind of living in and around London, you get better opportunities?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Although, obviously, the opportunity for the student can vary quite a lot as well. But it was no big thing to go from the British Library, from, say, the FE College in Orpington. But it would, and we could do that almost like a drop of a hat, because FE students tend to be a little older. But I remember when I worked in East London, I worked in a school that had, I don't know, how do you phrase it? Like the students were of a lower socioeconomic background, as they say, don't they? And it took
you had a high percentage of pupil premium students.
This was even before pupil premium, because pupil premiums, how long has pupil premium been around? This has been around,
I don't know, my entire teaching life.
Yeah, I think I predate pupil premium. That's how old I am. That's depressing.
I like to think of it more as that's how young I am.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't join you with that one. But we used to have a fund, so where the families couldn't pay for the trip, we would help them dip into it. It would take us a long time. We would have to give the parents lots and lots and lots of advance notice if we were going to do a theatre trip. So like 3 or 4 months advance notice. And we would offer the parents, they would write like a clause on the letter saying, yes, they would write a clause on the letter saying, if you want to pay this slowly over time, then talk to the school office to do it monthly.
Yeah, speaking as a parent, My daughter went to London for 3 days. I mean, they did a huge amount in 3 days. It was absolutely amazing, but it was over £400.
But this is the problem, because like schools just, you want to provide these opportunities for students, but there's just no money in the school's pot. So they're becoming increasingly more reliant on parents to contribute, and then some families just can't do that.
Do you, Robyn, have any school trip horror stories from your time?
I do. I've got lots of vomiting on public transport ones, which is just really grim, and I feel like, exactly. The best one, I think, it's not really a horror story because it's not like they stayed lost, but I did lose an entire class of sixth formers on a London theatre trip.
That's a great way to start it, though, is that they didn't stay lost.
So hashtag disclaimer, they're fine, they're okay.
They're fine, they all turned up.
I got them back. It's okay. They were all.
It was a week later, but
I was really young, and we went to the theatre, and we went to sit. That we were doing at the time. I can't remember what example it was. But we were doing Antony and Cleopatra, and it was the most phenomenal production. Sir Patrick Stewart and Francis Barber. It was like the production of dreams
of a
and
lifetime.
Of course, of a lot, amazing. I spent weeks on the phone getting these tickets, managed to get, I think 20 or something tickets for our English literature A-level students. And of course it just went whoosh over their heads. And they were very fidgety and very bored, and they got annoyed.
Yeah.
And then in the interval, like a couple of my colleagues and I snuck off to the bar, to get ourselves a refreshing beverage. And then we noticed that the seats for the students, there were about 5 or 6 left, but a large proportion of the seats for the students were empty. And we're kind of looking at each other going, okay, they'll probably just come back. And then obviously, the second half starts, and we think, oh, it'll be fine, they'll come back. And then the play finishes, and it's amazing, and it's standing ovations, and we turn around, and none of the seats are filled, like literally all 20 odd seats are empty. And I was quite early in my career, so I just went into a complete tailspin panic. My other colleague who was with me, who was sort of my NQT mentor, he did not care. He was like, yeah, whatever, I'm going home, see you later. And I'm thinking, and I'm in the middle of central London at like 11 o'clock at night going, I can't leave these students, I've got to find them, responsibility. And so I leave the theatre, and then one of the, like the attendants, the ushers, they're like, yeah, your students went that way. And they'd obviously gone to like the nearest pub, the Prince of York, which is a really like well-renowned LGBTQ plus pub. And it's quite late, and there's music blaring and stuff, and I just think, for heavens, well, I didn't think that actually, I thought a much ruder word, but I was like, okay, all right, come on then, I'm going to round you all up. So I go to the door, and I'm quite short, and I'm in my early 20s at this point, and I used to always, now not so much because I'm like 40, got 3 kids, but I used to get ID'd all the time. So this bouncer looks at me and goes, ID. And I was like, I haven't got any ID, but my students are in there. And he was like, ID, give me your ID. And I was like, I don't have any, I didn't drive at the time, I literally had nothing on me. So he wouldn't let me into the pub to get the students.
So your students got in, but you couldn't get in.
My 17-year-old students got into the pub, but I was not permitted into the pub. So I had to literally leave. It was quite funny, really. But yeah, I didn't. There were some words were said to me the following Monday morning. And
did you get in trouble?
Not formally, but basically my line manager didn't want to own up that he just left an NQT in London with loads of students, so kind of threw me under the bus a little bit.
Robyn.
But it was quite funny. I mean, they were fine. They were, as I said, we found them all eventually. They were a bit sheepish on the Monday morning because I had them, I think, for the first lesson of the back. And we'd gone on not towards the end of the week, but we'd gone on like a Thursday or something. And they were like, all right, miss. sort of thing. I just fronted it out. I just sort of started my lesson going, I hope you all had lovely weekends. Right. Can we please resume with Act 3, Scene 5?
Wow.
And just like desperately clung on to whatever, like, honour I had
Shreds
left.
of authority you had.
The hardest thing I had to do on the one school trip I went on was persuade like 40 kids to go to the top of Kinder Scout, and there was one kid who he really didn't want to come. His parents really wanted him to come. He was pupil premium. They couldn't really afford it. School trips did get so expensive. And they had paid for him to come. The school had paid for him to come because it was really good for them. And he was quite overweight and very unfit. So walking to the top of Kinder Scout is not easy. It's quite steep, it's really windy, and it's probably going to be raining. So I ended up stood at the back with this kid, and the only way I got him up the thing is by telling him stories the whole time. He's year 7, so he's quite little and old enough for stories. So I told him about when I worked in America at summer camp. I told him about when I met Taylor Swift. I told him about when I met Harry Styles. I told him about when I met Jimmy Carr. And then I got to the top of the hill. The TA who'd been with us was like, did you really meet all those people? And I was like, no, I needed more stories to come through. And the kid overheard and just burst into tears. And I was like, oh no. I was like, the first one was true. The first one was meeting Malcolm in the Middle, which did happen when I was at camp. But everything else was completely made up because you needed distracting. I'm sorry.
Oh,
it was done out of kindness.
Yeah.
I can do slightly better. It's not my story, but my dad's. He was a lecturer on a degree course doing wildlife photography and wildlife illustration. And so they went on lots of field trips, obviously into the countryside, looking at plants and nature. And to cut a long story short, he left 2 students in a wood overnight.
Yes.
How?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, he was in his car, and whoever counted them back onto the bus did not count correctly.
Oh.
And it wasn't until the next day that he realised these 2 hadn't come back. I mean, no one on the bus said anything either.
Parents?
Yeah. Well, they were FE, so to be fair, they were HE actually, so they were over 18. Thank goodness. Can you imagine the news stories if they'd been school children? And Dad had to drive back to wherever they were on this trip and pick them up.
Oh, wow.
And they had actually spent the night outside. But
Ooh.
I'm sure that was very character building for them, an overnight stay in the woods,
Oh yeah, well, actually, my dad thinks they did it deliberately. They did it on purpose.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
If Marie and Jodi's anecdotes haven't put you off, would you like to take your students on a school trip? Beyond is running a schools competition with the Warner Brothers studio tour to win tickets to their Making of Harry Potter experience. The prize includes studio tour tickets, an exclusive on-set lesson, copies of Harry Potter books, and much more. The competition runs until the 14th of October 2022. For more details, follow the link in the podcast description, and good luck.
So, Jodi, thinking about school trips, what would be your star and what would be your wish?
I think my star is just the image of your dad leaving 2 poor students in a forest overnight. And the plan that went in, I like to think they were kind of poring over blueprints at night to make that happen. And that they got away with it on the bus by someone. I don't know if you ever watched the film Madeline, where someone holds a hat on their hand to get away with the head count. I like to think someone was doing that.
Yeah, they could have done.
So that would be my star. What would your star be?
My star, well, I was thinking also about losing pupils, because Robyn lost quite a number of hers.
Just a couple.
But what I'd really like to happen is if you could choose which pupils you conveniently lose. That would be ideal, to be honest. So that would be my little star. And it's a bit, I suppose it's a bit of a wish as well.
I think my wish would have to be more school trips for maths teachers because we don't get nearly enough of them. And lots of school trips to really fun places like Alton Towers and Harry Potter World.
I think you could write Alton Towers into a maths scheme of work quite easily.
There's been attempts.
Yeah, there's lots of angles and speed and distance, and I think that could really work.
I think so. My current goal is to get zoo school trips as part of the maths curriculum because we have a lot of translation resources that lead to pictures of animals.
Brilliant.
So then you have to go to the zoo.
Yeah, I think that's good. Excellent.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Robyn, and to our listeners. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been Jodi. Thank you for listening.
And I've been Marie, and thank you very much.
This podcast is proudly produced by Beyond. Please bear in mind the views and opinions expressed are those of individuals and may not represent those of Beyond or Twinkle.